What would you do if someone was poisoning your mother, and no one believed you? I didn't just get mad. I didn't just fight back. I destroyed them. When I discovered that our ruthless HOA president was slowly poisoning my mom's water supply, I knew one thing: this wasn't just about fines or rules anymore. This was war. They thought they could push us out of our home, little by little. They thought they could make my mother suffer without consequences. But they had no idea who they were messing with. Because I did something they never saw coming. I bought the rights to their water supply. And I cut them off completely. And that was just the beginning. I was watering Mom's prized roses when Karen Thompson's shiny black SUV pulled into our driveway, kicking up gravel. My stomach instantly knotted. Every time the HOA president visited, trouble followed. "Alex," Karen called through her barely rolled-down window. "Those garden gnomes simply must go. They violate Section 8, Paragraph 12 of our community guidelines." I set down my watering can, my jaw tightening. "They've been here for 7 years, Karen. Since Dad died." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Rules are rules. I've been lenient, but the board is insisting. Remove them by Friday, or it's a $200 fine per gnome." As her SUV reversed, I counted the garden gnomes, all 8 of them. Each one held a memory of my father. Each one was now a target in her campaign to break us. And the $1,600 in fines? We didn't have that kind of money. Not with Mom's medical bills piling up. That night, I carefully wrapped each gnome in newspaper and stored them in the garage. It felt like pieces of our happiness were being chipped away. But I had no idea that this was only the beginning of something far more sinister. Dad had bought one for Mom every year on her birthday. Now, they sat in the dark, like pieces of our past being erased. On Friday, I spotted Miranda strolling through the neighborhood with her clipboard, checking for violations. She paused in front of our house, nodded approvingly, then jotted something down. By Monday, a new notice arrived. Our mailbox was the wrong shade of blue. It had to be repainted in the HOA-approved midnight azure. "It's just a mailbox," I told Mom as I painted it. "Not worth the fight." But the next week, it was our bird feeder. Then the wind chimes. Then the height of our hedges. Each time Miranda showed up, Mom seemed worse afterward, more tired, more confused. Was the stress making her condition deteriorate? One evening, as I took out the trash, I noticed Greg Lewis, Miranda's husband, standing near our water meter. The moment he saw me, he quickly turned away, pretending to check his phone. "Everything okay?" I called out. "Just walking the dog," he replied, but I didn't see a dog. I mentioned it to our neighbor, Olivia Martinez, the next day. She lived across the street and had been in the neighborhood for years. "The Lewises don't even own a dog," she whispered. Then, glancing around, she added, "Between you and me, Miranda's been targeting everyone who voted against her in the last HOA election. Your mom was the only one who spoke out against her plan to double our fees." That night, Mom couldn't keep dinner down. Under the bathroom light, her skin looked slightly yellow. "I think we should go to the hospital," I said, helping her to the car. At the ER, doctors ran tests but found nothing conclusive. "Could be a virus," one suggested. "Or something environmental." On the drive home, I took the long way, passing the Lewis house. Through their kitchen window, I saw Miranda and Greg laughing over glasses of wine. The next morning, Mom couldn't get out of bed. Her hands trembled so badly she couldn't hold her coffee mug. I called Dr. Patel, her physician, who squeezed her in for an emergency visit. While waiting for our appointment, I walked the property line, checking for anything unusual. Near the water meter, where I'd seen Greg, I noticed small droplets of blue liquid on the rocks. Then my phone rang. It was the hospital. Your mother collapsed in Dr. Patel's office, the nurse said. We're running toxicology tests. The doctor suspects poisoning. Poisoning. My mind flashed to Greg near the water meter. The blue droplets. Mom's worsening symptoms every time Miranda came around. I rushed to the hardware store and bought a security camera. That night, I installed it in our oak tree, aimed directly at the water meter. Mom stayed in the hospital for 3 days. Tests showed high levels of unusual chemicals, but nothing doctors could immediately identify. Whatever it is, it's stressing her liver and kidneys, Dr. Patel explained. Has she been exposed to anything toxic? When we got home, a new violation notice was taped to the door. The HOA was fining us for unauthorized landscaping, because I hadn't mowed the lawn while taking care of Mom. Then my security camera alert pinged, someone was at our water meter right now. I bolted outside just in time to see Greg Lewis hurrying away. Miranda was waiting in their SUV, engine running. What the hell are you doing to our water? I shouted. Miranda rolled down her window, feigning concern. Jason, I know this is a stressful time for you. Maybe your mother's condition is affecting your judgment. They drove off before I could respond. My hands trembled as I checked the security footage. There it was, Greg pouring something into our water line. Miranda keeping watch. Both of them smiling. I collected a water sample and took the footage to a testing lab. The technician, Dave, took it seriously. It'll take 48 hours for a full analysis, he warned. But I can run a quick scan today. While waiting, I visited Mom in the hospital. Her skin looked ashen against the white sheets. How's the neighborhood? She asked weakly. I forced a smile. Olivia brought soup. Even Mr. Jenkins from 2 doors down sent flowers. And Miranda? Don't worry about her. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Dave, call me ASAP. I stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding. You were right, Dave said. Your water has ethylene glycol. Antifreeze? My stomach dropped. Low concentration, but definitely there. You need to call the police. Now. I raced to the station with my water sample and footage. Officer Ramirez took my statement but looked unconvinced. The video shows Greg at your water meter, but not what he's pouring, she said. And trace chemicals can enter water supplies in many ways. My mother is in the hospital, I snapped. The timeline matches. We'll investigate, she promised. But without direct proof, we can't act. Back home, another HOA notice awaited: remove unauthorized security equipment or face a $500 fine. They knew about the camera. They were watching me. I installed 3 more, hidden this time. Then I called my college friend, Ethan, an environmental lawyer. They're poisoning her, I told him. Slowly. Just enough to make her sick, not enough to kill her outright. They want us gone. This is serious, Ethan said. We need a different approach. Tell me everything about the neighborhood's water system. For 3 hours, we dug through records. Then Ethan found something. Jason. Pinewood Estates gets its water from a private company, not the city. Why does that matter? Because the company just went bankrupt. And whoever buys it, controls the neighborhood's water. A plan formed in my mind. How much would it cost to buy the water company? Ethan made some calls while I paced the hospital corridor, waiting for Mom's latest test results. When he finally called back, his voice was urgent. You won't believe this, he said. The company that owns Pinewood Estates' water system is barely holding on. They're desperate to sell. If we move fast, you could buy it out from under them. How much? Not as much as you'd think. They're willing to let it go for $35,000. My stomach twisted. That was still a lot of money. But compared to the hospital bills, the fines, and the cost of moving, it might be our only way out. I don't have that kind of cash, I admitted. But I do, Ethan said. At least, part of it. I can cover half. The rest, we'll figure something out. I hesitated. Taking Ethan's money felt like crossing a line. But if we pulled this off, I wouldn't just be getting revenge, I'd be stopping them. Let's do it, I said. The next 48 hours were a blur. Ethan handled the legal paperwork while I scrounged up every penny I had, even taking a loan against Dad's old truck. Meanwhile, Olivia spread the word to other neighbors, the HOA was poisoning my mother. Some didn't believe it. But others? They'd been noticing strange illnesses too. The final push came when Olivia's son, Daniel, ended up in urgent care with similar symptoms. That night, half the neighborhood gathered on my porch. "This has to stop," Mr. Jenkins said, his voice shaking. "What can we do?" I took a deep breath. "I need help buying the water company. If we own it, we control it. No more HOA interference." People murmured, glancing at each other. Then, to my shock, wallets started opening. "I can pitch in $500, Mrs. Patel said. "Make it $1,000 from me," Jenkins added. By morning, we had all the money we needed. The sale went through 3 days later. The HOA had no idea. I waited until the transfer was official, then went straight to Miranda's house. She opened the door in a silk robe, sipping her morning coffee. "Jason," she said, feigning surprise. "If this is about another fine." I cut her off. "It's about the water." Her face barely flickered. "Oh." I pulled out the deed. "I own it now, Miranda. Every drop. And guess what? The HOA is no longer a priority customer." Her smile vanished. "You wouldn't dare." I pulled out my phone and cut off their water supply. Her coffee mug slipped from her hand and shattered on the porch. "Enjoy your dry lawn," I said, turning to leave. "Oh, and you might want to check your medical records. I have a feeling Greg's been a little too generous with the antifreeze." The police reopened their investigation that night. With the neighborhood rallying behind me, the pressure mounted. Greg was arrested first, caught on my hidden camera tampering with another house's water meter. The toxicology reports sealed the deal. Miranda tried to play innocent. But when the HOA's finances were investigated, it turned out she'd been stealing from the community for years. She took a plea deal and disappeared overnight. Mom got better. So did Daniel. So did half the people Miranda had been targeting. With the HOA dismantled and the neighborhood controlling its own water, things changed fast. People painted their mailboxes whatever color they wanted. Wind chimes returned. And Dad's garden statues? I put them back where they belonged. As for me, I didn't just get revenge. I took back our home. And no one would ever mess with my family again. With the water company now under my control, I spent the next morning reviewing the system logs. I wanted to see exactly how the HOA had been managing things before I took over. It didn't take long to find something suspicious. The logs showed that certain houses, including mine, had fluctuating water pressure at odd intervals, right around the times Greg had been seen near our meter. I took screenshots and sent them straight to Detective Rivera. "These logs show someone was tampering with our water supply," I told her. She sighed. "It's suspicious, but it's not a smoking gun, Jason. We need undeniable proof." I clenched my jaw. "Then I'll get it." That night, I moved my security cameras closer to the street and set up motion alerts. I didn't have to wait long. At 2:14 a.m., Greg's car rolled up to my house. I watched the live feed as he got out, glanced around, and crouched near my water meter. He pulled out a bottle, small, dark, just like before. This time, though, I was ready. I grabbed my baseball bat and stormed outside. "Hey, Greg!" I yelled. He jumped back like I'd caught him mid-crime, because I had. The bottle in his hand slipped, clattering to the pavement. A few drops of liquid spilled out, soaking into the dirt. I didn't need to see the label to know what it was. Greg bolted for his car. I sprinted after him, but he jumped in and sped off. I barely managed to get his license plate as he tore down the street. I sent the footage straight to Rivera. "This is the proof you needed," I said. It was better than proof. This was caught in the act evidence. 2 hours later, police swarmed Greg's house. They arrested him on multiple counts of poisoning, plus trespassing, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy. But Miranda? She was still free. And I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. I didn't have to wait long for her response. The next morning, I found a legal notice taped to my door. Cease and desist, defamation and harassment. Miranda was suing me. I laughed. Actually laughed. After everything she'd done, she was trying to play the victim. I called Ethan. "She's getting desperate," I told him. "Yeah," he agreed, "but this means she's scared." He was right. The lawsuit was a bluff, a scare tactic. But I wasn't backing down. Instead, I had something even bigger planned. At the next HOA board meeting, I walked in like I owned the place. Because now, in a way, I did. The other board members were already murmuring about Greg's arrest. Miranda sat at the head of the table, trying to keep her composure, but her eyes flickered with panic when she saw me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, tossing a stack of papers onto the table. "I have an announcement." Miranda's eyes narrowed. "You're not on the board, Jason." I grinned. "No, but I do own the water company now. Which means I control everything that flows into this neighborhood." Murmurs spread across the room. "You can't just," Miranda started. "Oh, but I can," I cut her off. "And I've decided that, starting next week, all HOA board members will be required to submit independent water tests for their homes. Just a little safety measure." Her face turned pale. "And if I find any trace of toxic substances in your water lines, guess who's getting reported to the police?" Miranda stood so fast her chair toppled over. "This meeting is over," she snapped, storming toward the exit. I called after her. "Greg rolled on you, by the way." She froze. "Turns out," I continued, "he had a lot to say about who was really behind the poisonings. And guess what? He didn't take a plea deal. Which means, any minute now." I pointed toward the door. Just then, 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. Miranda tried to run. She only made it 3 steps before the cops grabbed her. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "I am the HOA." The officers ignored her. They read her rights as they cuffed her and led her out the door. The moment she was gone, a slow clap started from the back of the room. It was Olivia. The rest of the homeowners joined in. The tyrant was gone. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. Greg and Miranda were charged with felony poisoning, along with fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. The HOA, now leaderless, crumbled. I returned Dad's garden statues to the yard. I repainted the mailbox any color I wanted. And when Mom finally came home from the hospital, the entire neighborhood was there to welcome her. She smiled at me, weak but grateful. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said, glancing at Olivia, Ethan, and the others. "We did it. And for the first time in a long time. Our home actually felt like home again." A month later, Ethan called me with an idea. You know, he said, we could turn the water company into a co-op, let the whole neighborhood own a piece. No HOA interference ever again. I thought about it. You think they'd go for it? He chuckled. Jason, after everything you just did? They'd follow you anywhere. And he was right. Pinewood Estates was ours now. And no one, no HOA, no tyrant, no power-hungry crook, would ever take it from us again. One evening, I sat with Mom on the porch, watching the sun set over the neighborhood we'd fought for. She squeezed my hand. Your father would be proud, she said. I looked out at the houses, the gardens, the people finally free to live how they wanted. And for the first time in years, I believed it. The neighborhood was finally ours again. No more ridiculous rules. No more fear. No more HOA dictatorship. For the first time in years, people felt free. Mom sat beside me on the porch, watching as kids played in their yards filled with the decorations, plants, and colors they chose. She let out a deep sigh, one that seemed to carry away years of stress and struggle. You did it, she whispered. Your father would be so proud. I felt my throat tighten. I thought about everything we had been through, the fights, the losses, the moments where I almost gave up. And then I looked around. At Olivia, laughing with her kids. At Ethan, finally planning his own future without fear of HOA fines. At my neighbors, who had stood together to reclaim our home. And I realized. This wasn't just about winning. This was about belonging. A place wasn't home because of the walls, the lawns, or the water meters. Home was the people. The ones who fought for you. The ones who stood beside you. The ones who never let you face the battle alone. And as the sun set over Pinewood Estates, I knew one thing for sure. We had won more than just our freedom. We had won our home back. And no one would ever take it from us again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more thrilling and emotional stories like this. And if you made it this far, comment the letter 7 below so I know you're a real one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.